Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was in one piece and reborn with his memories. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sensation of death was cold. It was a creeping numbness that started at the fingertips and worked its way inward, shutting down the lights one by one. Izuku Midoriya remembered that cold vividly. He remembered the crumbling skyline of a destroyed Japan, the dust choking the air, and the final, cataclysmic clash against the amalgamation of hatred that was All for One and Shigaraki. He remembered the feeling of One for All shattering, not into glass, but into stardust, leaving his body to feel one last, desperate strike. He remembered dying. He was sure of it. So, the humidity was a surprise. The air here wasn't filled with dust or the metallic tang of blood. It was thick, wet, and smelled of loam, rotting vegetation, and sea salt. The sounds were wrong, too. Instead of sirens or the weeping of civilians, there was the prehistoric shriek of birds that sounded far too large to be pigeons, and the chittering of insects that buzzed like chainsaws. Izuku opened his eyes. Above him was a canopy of green so dense it blotted out the sky, filtered only by shafts of golden sunlight. He tried to sit up, and the world tilted. His center of gravity was wrong. His hands, scuffed, tanned, and gripping the mossy earth, were tiny. They were the hands of a child, no older than 10. Again, he whispered, his voice cracking. It was a child's voice. I'm starting again. It had been 6 months since he had woken up in this forest. 6 months since he realized he wasn't in Nizudafu, or Japan, or perhaps even Earth. 6 months of survival. Izuku Midoriya stood up, dusting off his ragged shorts. He wore a tunic stitched together from the pelt of a strange, tiger-sized monkey he had found dead a month ago, and his feet were wrapped in tough leather strips. He looked like a wild animal, but his eyes were sharp, vibrating with an intelligence that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. He reached into a hollow in a nearby tree and pulled out his most prized possession, a stack of flattened, dried bark sheets tied together with vines. He pulled a piece of charcoal from a pouch at his waist. Entry 184, he wrote, the Japanese characters messy but legible. Discovered a new species of giant beetle near the northern ridge. Carapace seems resistant to blunt force. Possible weakness, underbelly. Strength training continues. The stockpile is gone, but the vessel remains. Izuku sighed, tucking the charcoal away. He closed his eyes and breathed. In his old life, One for All was a torch passed down, a singularity of power. Now, that torch was extinguished. He couldn't summon Black Whip. He couldn't float. There was no danger sense screaming at him, but the ghost of the power remained. It was as if his soul had been stretched by holding the quirk, leaving a massive, empty container behind. He focused on his body. He tightened his muscles, imagining the familiar green lightning. It didn't come. But something else did. A heat in his gut, a raw, formless energy that felt like the physical manifestation of willpower. It's not a quirk, he analyzed, hopping onto a tree branch with practiced ease. It's biological. Or maybe spiritual. The people here, the strong ones, they use it. I have to learn how. He leaped. He moved through the trees of empty Kalubo with the agility of a spider monkey. He was using a modified version of full cowl. Not powered by energy, but by perfect biomechanical efficiency. He used his momentum, swinging and rebounding, keeping his small body in constant motion. He was hungry. And in this forest, if you didn't hunt, you were the prey. The target was a crocodile. A crocodile the size of a school bus. Izuku crouched on a hanging vine, looking down at the riverbank. The beast was sunning itself, its scales looking as hard as steel. In his old life, a 5% Detroit smash would have handled this. Now, he had to be smarter. Target has a blind spot at the rear right quadrant, Izuku muttered, the habit of mumbling spilling out into the jungle silence. Reaction time estimated at 0.5 seconds based on previous observation. Jaw strength lethal. Tail whip lethal. If I can sever the motor nerve at the base of the skull. He tightened his grip on his weapon, a heavy, iron pipe he had scavenged from the massive trash heap at the edge of the island, sharpened to a point on one end. He dropped. Gravity took him. As he fell, he twisted his body, adding centrifugal force to his descent. He didn't aim for the skull, the bone was too thick. He aimed for the soft tissue behind the eye. Smash! The pipe connected with a wet thud. The crocodile roared, a sound that shook the leaves, and thrashed. Izuku didn't stick the landing. He bounced off the creature's snout, using the recoil to flip backward onto a rock. The beast lunged, snapping jaws that could crush a tank. Izuku didn't panic. He had faced Shigaraki. He had faced Overhaul. A big lizard was just a geometry problem. He sidestepped, the wind of the snap ruffling his messy green hair. He slid under the creature's raised bulk, jamming the pipe upward into the soft white underbelly. Sorry, Izuku whispered. With a heave, he drove the metal deep. The beast convulsed once, twice, and then slumped into the mud. Izuku exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. His heart was hammering, but he felt good. He was getting stronger. His body was adapting to the insane physics of this world at a frightening rate. He began the arduous process of carving a chunk of meat for dinner when he felt it. It wasn't danger sense. It was just instinct, the honed paranoia of a soldier who had lived through a war. He spun around, holding a bloody slab of crocodile meat like a shield. Come out, Izuku said, his voice flat. For a moment, there was only the buzzing of cicadas. Then, the bushes rustled. A boy stepped out. He looked to be about Izuku's age, maybe a few months older. He had freckles, a scowl that looked etched into his face, and wild, wavy black hair. He wore a tank top and shorts, and in his hand, he held a long iron pipe, remarkably similar to the one Izuku had dropped. But it was the eyes that stopped Izuku. They were dark, cold, and filled with a hostility so potent it felt like physical pressure. Izuku had seen eyes like that before. He had seen them on villains, and he had seen them, briefly, on Kaken during their worst days. That's my kill, the boy said. His voice was rough, unpolished. Izuku looked at the bus-sized crocodile. There's plenty to share. It's huge. I saw it first, the boy snarled. He shifted his stance. It was untrained but balanced. He was a brawler. Drop the meat and get lost, or I'll kill you. Izuku blinked. Kill? The intent was genuine. This wasn't a schoolyard threat. This kid meant it. You're a child, Izuku said, confused. Why would you want to kill me over food? The forest is full of it. The boy's eyes narrowed. I don't need a reason to crush a bug. Give it here. He lunged. The boy was fast. Surprisingly fast. He swung the pipe with lethal intent, aiming for Izuku's temple. Izuku didn't block. He had no weapon currently. Instead, he dropped his weight, letting the pipe whistle harmlessly over his head. As the boy overextended, Izuku pivoted on his heel, stepping into the boy's personal space. Your swing is too wide, Izuku muttered, tapping the boy lightly on the solar plexus. You're putting all your weight on your front foot. If I were an enemy, I'd sweep you. The boy gasped, stumbling back, not from pain, but from shock. He swung again, a horizontal slash. Izuku ducked, weaving under the blow. You're telegraphing. You look at where you want to hit before you move. Shut up. The boy roared, swinging wildly now. Stop talking. Why won't you fight back? Because you're a kid. Izuku yelled back, hopping backward onto a tree root. I'm not going to hurt a civilian. Civilian? The boy looked insulted. He threw the pipe down and reached into his belt, pulling out a knife. I'm a pirate. Or I will be. Pirate? Izuku's brow furrowed. In this world, he had learned that pirate was the catch-all term for criminals. But this boy, he didn't feel like a villain. He felt like a cornered animal. The boy charged with the knife. Izuku sighed. Disarming maneuver 4B. He waited until the blade was inches from his chest. He caught the boy's wrist, used the boy's own momentum to spin him around, and pinned his arm behind his back, pressing him gently but firmly against the trunk of a tree. Let go of me! The boy screamed, thrashing. Calm down, Izuku said. I'm not going to take your territory. I'm just living here. You can have the crocodile. I just want this piece. He released the boy and stepped back, hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender. The boy spun around, chest heaving, knife trembling in his hand. He looked at Izuku, really looked at him, with a mixture of rage and confusion. No one had ever handled him like that. No one had ever pinned him without hurting him. Who are you? The boy demanded. I'm Izuku, he said. He hesitated. Just Izuku. The boy stared at him for a long second, then spat on the ground. I'm Ace. If I see you again, you're dead. Don't think I'll go easy on you just because you got lucky. Ace snatched up the slab of meat Izuku had carved, grabbed his pipe, and bolted into the bushes, leaving the massive carcass behind. Izuku watched him go. He pulled out his notebook. Subject Ace. Age 10. Combat style, aggressive, self-taught brawling. High physical specs. Psychological profile, extreme anger issues, trust issues. Reminds me of Kaken, but sadder. Note, keep in distance. 2 weeks passed. The ghost of MT Kalubo became a rumor among the bandits, and the few hunters who dared the mountain. They spoke of a green shadow that moved through the trees, a child who fought tigers with his bare hands and spoke to himself in a strange tongue. Izuku didn't mind the solitude. It gave him time to train. He had found a clearing near a waterfall where the rocks were slick and treacherous. It was perfect. He spent his mornings doing handstand push-ups on the slippery stones, trying to master his balance. 998, 999. 1000. He collapsed, panting. His arms screamed in protest. It wasn't enough. Without OFA, his progress felt agonizingly slow. He needed weights. He needed resistance. Impressive form for a brat. Izuku froze. The voice was deep, gravelly, and carried the weight of a mountain. He scrambled to his feet, spinning around. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a giant. He was an old man, broad-chested and muscular, wearing a white suit and a marine coat draped over his shoulders like a cape. He had gray hair, a thick beard, and a scar near his eye. He was eating a handful of rice crackers, chewing loudly. Izuku's danger instincts, the ones that had been dormant since his death, screamed. Run. This man was a titan. He was stronger than All Might. No, not stronger, different. All Might felt like the sun. This man felt like a natural disaster. A hurricane in human form. Who are you? Izuku asked, sinking into a defensive stance. The old man crunched a cracker. Wahahoho. You got spirited eyes, kid. I've been watching you for 10 minutes. You breathe funny. I breathe? Yeah. Like you're trying to suck in the whole world. The man stepped forward. I'm Garp. But you can call me sir, or please don't hit me, Garp. Izuku's mind raced. He had heard the name from the trash heap residents. The hero of the Marines. A legend. You're a Marine, Izuku said, lowering his guards slightly. You catch bad guys. Usually, Garp grinned, and it was a terrifying expression. But right now, I'm visiting my grandson. And I find a feral kid living in the woods near his hideout. You know Ace? We met, Izuku said carefully. He tried to stab me. Sounds like him. Garp laughed thunderously. Little rascal. Listen, kid. You're strong. I saw how you took down that boar yesterday. Clean hit. Efficient. Suddenly Garp vanished. Izuku didn't see him move. 1 second he was 10 meters away, the next, he was directly in front of Izuku. Soru? Izuku's mind supplied the term from his tactical analysis of this world's fighters. High-speed movement. Garp's fist came down. It wasn't a punch meant to kill. It was a love tap. But to Izuku, it looked like a meteor. Izuku didn't think. He reacted. He couldn't dodge this. It was too fast. He crossed his arms over his head, bracing every muscle, and unconsciously pushed that heat in his gut outward to reinforce his skin. Iron mass. Or a crude imitation of it. Bonk. The impact drove Izuku into the ground. The rock beneath him cracked. Pain exploded in his forearms and skull. Oh wow! Izuku cried out, tears instantly springing to his eyes. He rubbed the growing lump on his head. What was that for? Garp looked at his own fist, then at Izuku, eyebrows raised. Ho? You didn't pass out. And my hand actually felt that. You used hockey just now, didn't you? Hockey? Izuku rubbed his head. Is that what it is? The willpower energy? Garp's grin widened. It was predatory and proud. Unnatural. And self-taught. Wahahoho. I found a gem in the trash heap. He reached down and grabbed Izuku by the back of his tunic, lifting him into the air like a kitten. Hey! Let go! Izuku flailed. No can do, kid! Garp started walking. You're too talented to be rotting in the woods eating lizards. You need guidance. You need discipline. You need to become a fine Marine. I don't want to be a Marine, Izuku shouted. From what he'd seen in the Great Terminal, the nobles looking down on the poor, the corruption, he wasn't sold on the government. What was that? Garp stopped, bringing Izuku face to face. You want to be a pirate like that ginger-haired brat Shanks? I want to be a hero, Izuku yelled. Garp paused. A hero? Someone who saves everyone, Izuku insisted, his eyes burning. Someone who makes people smile. I don't care if it's Marine or pirate. I just want to save people. Garp stared at him. The playfulness vanished for a second, replaced by a somber, assessing look. He saw the fire in the kid's eyes. It was the same fire Roger had. The same fire Dragon had. A hero, huh? Garp grunted. He adjusted his grip. Well, you can't save anyone if you starve to death in the woods. You're coming with me. The destination was a bandit hut. It was a ramshackle wooden building nestled deep in the mountains. Garp kicked the door open, nearly tearing it off its hinges. Dayton, a large, curly-haired woman with a masculine face and a cigarette dangling from her mouth, scrambled out of the back room, followed by several smaller bandits. Garp? She shrieked. You old crazy bastard. You can't just barge in here. I brought you a souvenir. Garp threw Izuku onto the wooden floor. Izuku rolled and sprang to his feet, instantly analyzing the room. 4 exits. Several weapons on the wall. The woman is the leader, Dayton, high stress levels. Another one? Dayton screamed, pulling at her hair. Ace is already a nightmare. He brings home dead bears. He tries to kill Dogra. I can't handle another brat. This is Izuku, Garp announced, picking his nose. He's staying. Raise him right, or I'll arrest you for all those crimes I've been ignoring. This is tyranny. Dayton wept. Where is Ace? Garp asked. Out. He's always out. Garp looked at Izuku. Listen, kid. You live here now. Dayton is ugly, but she'll feed you. Train with Ace. Beat some sense into him if you have to. I'll be back in a few months. And with that, the Vice Admiral turned and left, leaving a dust cloud and a stunned silence in his wake. Izuku stood up, dusting himself off. He looked at Dayton. Dayton looked at him. Can you cook? Izuku blinked. I can make katsudon? If we have pork? Dayton sighed, a long, rattling sound. Fine. You sleep in the corner. Don't piss off Ace. And don't eat all our food. Living with Ace was complicated. For the first week, Ace ignored Izuku. He would leave at dawn and return at night, covered in bandages and dirt. Izuku tried to follow him once, using his stealth skills, but Ace led him into a trap, a rock fall that Izuku barely avoided. Stop following me, Ace had hissed from the shadows, so Izuku stopped following. Instead, he made himself useful. He cleaned the hut, which horrified the bandits. He organized their stolen loot. He cooked, and every night, he updated his notebook. Ace is hiding something. He goes to the Great Terminal every day. He's hoarding money. Why? To buy a ship? To escape? One evening, Ace came back limping. He had a nasty gash on his leg. He sat in the corner, trying to bandage it with a dirty rag. Izuku walked over, carrying a bowl of hot water and clean cloth. Go away, Ace growled. That's going to get infected, Izuku said calmly. And if you get gangrene, they'll have to cut your leg off. Can't be a pirate with one leg. Well, you can, like Zeph, but it limits your mobility. Ace stared at him. You talk too much. I know. Izuku knelt down. Let me help. Ace hesitated, his hand hovering over his pipe. Then, slowly, he pulled his hand away. Izuku worked efficiently. He cleaned the wound, applied a poultice made from herbs he had gathered in the forest, knowledge from his survival phase, and wrapped it. "Why are you so strong?" Ace asked suddenly. The hostility was dampened, replaced by curiosity. "I'm not strong," Izuku said quietly. "I used to be, much stronger. But I lost it." "Lost it?" "I gave it away," Izuku corrected, tightening the bandage. "To save someone," Ace frowned. "That sounds stupid. Power is everything. If you don't have power, people take things from you. They kill you. Or they throw you away." Izuku looked up. He saw the cracks in Ace's armor. The deep-seated fear that he was unwanted. "Power is important," Izuku agreed. "But it's pointless if you don't have anyone to use it for," Ace scoffed, pulling his leg away. "I don't need anyone." He rolled over and went to sleep. But that night he didn't set a trap by his bed. 3 months later, the dynamic shifted again. Izuku was doing handstand push-ups in the yard. He was up to 2,000 now, when Garp returned. "Dayton!" The door flew off its hinges. This time, it actually broke. "Fix the damn door, you old gorilla!" Dayton shrieked. Garp marched in, holding a squirming bundle in his hand. "Put me down! I'm gonna tell Shanks on you!" The bundle yelled. Garp dropped the boy next to Izuku. Izuku stopped his workout and flipped onto his feet. He looked at the new arrival. It was a small boy, maybe 7 years old. He wore a simple t-shirt with the word Anchor on it, blue shorts, and a straw hat that looked slightly too big for him. He had a round face, a small scar under his left eye, and an energy that radiated pure, unadulterated chaos. "This is Luffy," Garp announced. "He's my grandson. He's staying too." "3 of them?" Dayton looked ready to faint. First the demon child, then the green ghost, and now this monkey? Luffy sat up, adjusting his hat. He looked at Dayton, then at Izuku. Then he grinned. It was a grin that stretched too wide. A grin that defied anatomy. "Hi! I'm Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates." Izuku froze. The smile. The absolute, unwavering conviction. The reckless optimism. All Might? No, it wasn't All Might. All Might was a pillar of strength. This kid was a rubber band. But the spirit was identical. It was the spirit of someone who looked at the impossible and laughed. Ace walked out of the woods, carrying a dead bird. He stopped when he saw Luffy. "Another annoying one?" Ace scowled. Luffy saw Ace, and his eyes lit up. "Whoa! You look strong. Be my friend." "No," Ace said, and spat on him. Luffy's jaw dropped. "Why did you spit on me?" "Because you're annoying." Ace walked past him into the hut. Luffy puffed up his cheeks. "I'm not annoying. I'm strong. My punches are like pistols." "Go home to your mommy," Ace jeered. "I don't have a mommy!" Luffy shouted. Ace stopped. He turned back, his eyes dark. "Neither do we." The tension in the air was palpable. Izuku stepped forward, intervening before Ace could do something he'd regret. "I'm Izuku," he said, offering a hand to Luffy. Luffy looked at the hand, then at Izuku. He grinned again. "You have green hair. Like broccoli." Izuku's sweat dropped. Yeah? Sure. Can you do cool stuff?" Luffy asked, stretching his cheek out 3 feet. "I ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi. I'm a rubber man." Izuku's eyes widened. "Devil fruit. Paramecia type. Alters body composition." He immediately pulled out his notebook. "Fascinating," Izuku muttered, circling Luffy. "Blunt force immunity? Electrical resistance? How does your blood flow work if your veins are rubber? Can you stretch indefinitely, or is there a snap-back limit?" Luffy stared at him with blank eyes. "I don't know what you're saying. Are you hungry?" "I'm hungry." The next week was a disaster. Luffy followed Ace everywhere. Ace tried to kill Luffy. Literally. He rolled logs at him, cut rope bridges, and led him into wolf dens. And every time, Izuku was there. When the log rolled, Izuku kicked it off course, shattering the wood with a hockey-infused shin. When the bridge broke, Izuku dove and caught Luffy by his stretchy arm. When the wolves attacked, Izuku stood in front of Luffy, unleashing a blast of Conqueror's haki, though he still couldn't control it fully, that sent the wolves whimpering away. Ace was furious. "Why do you keep saving him?" Ace yelled one evening, after Izuku had fished a drowning Luffy out of the river. Because he's your brother. Izuku shouted back, soaking wet. Or he wants to be. I don't want a weakling brother. Ace roared. He's not weak. Izuku stood up, water dripping from his curls. He's just little. And he keeps coming back, doesn't he? No matter what you do to him, he follows you. That's not weakness, Ace. That's guts. Ace fell silent. He looked at Luffy, who was shivering on the bank, coughing up water. I'm not weak, Luffy wheezed. I'm gonna be king. Ace grit his teeth and stormed off. The turning point came at the edge of the great terminal. Izuku had lost track of them. He had been distracted analyzing a new plant species, and when he looked up, Ace and Luffy were gone. Panic. He sprinted through the trees, his movements a green blur. He followed the tracks, Luffy's distinctive sandal prints and Ace's boots. They led toward the trash heap. Toward the domain of Blue Jam's pirates. He heard the screaming before he saw them. In a clearing near the edge of the forest, a massive pirate, Porchemy, was holding Luffy by the neck. Ace was standing there, pipe in hand, looking terrified but holding his ground. Tell me where the money is. Porchemy roared, raising a spiked glove. I won't tell. Luffy screamed, crying. Friends don't tell. Izuku's heart stopped. The money? Ace and Sabo's treasure? Luffy knows about it. And he's protecting it? Porchemy swung the glove. Smash. The sound wasn't flesh hitting flesh. It was metal hitting metal. Porchemy blinked. His spiked glove had been stopped. Standing between the pirate and Luffy was Izuku. He had caught the spiked glove with his bare hand. His fingers were wrapped around the spikes, bleeding, but his grip was iron. Green electricity crackled faintly around Izuku's body. It wasn't one for all. It was the manifestation of his pure, unadulterated rage, fueling his haki. Get your hands off him, Izuku whispered. The voice was demonic. Porchemy stepped back, unnerved. Who the hell are you? I'm the decoy, Izuku said. Decoy? Now Ace. Ace launched himself from the bushes, swinging his pipe with everything he had. He cracked Porchemy across the face. The pirate stumbled, dropping Luffy. Izuku caught Luffy before he hit the ground. Are you okay, Izuku? Luffy bawled, wrapping his rubber arms around Izuku's neck. I didn't tell. I didn't tell. I know, Izuku said softly. You did great. You're a hero, Luffy. Porchemy roared, pulling a sword. I'll kill you brats. Izuku set Luffy down. He looked at Ace. For the first time, they weren't enemies. They weren't rivals. They were soldiers on the same side. Ace, Izuku said, slipping into a low stance. Center of gravity low. Aim for the knees. I'll take the high guard. Ace smirked, wiping blood from his cheek. Don't tell me what to do, Broccoli. They moved together. It wasn't a fight, it was a dissection. Ace was the brawn, the raw fire. Izuku was the scalpel. When Porchemy swung at Ace, Izuku kicked the sword arm to deflect it. When Porchemy tried to grab Izuku, Ace smashed his kneecap. They flowed around each other like water and fire. Finally, Izuku leaped into the air. He spun, channeling all his momentum into his right leg. Shoot style, Dawn Axe. He brought his heel down on Porchemy's head. At the same moment, Ace swung his pipe into the pirate's stomach. The pirate folded and collapsed, unconscious. Silence fell over the clearing. Ace panted, leaning on his pipe. He looked at Porchemy, then at Izuku, then at Luffy. You! Ace started, looking at Luffy. You really didn't tell him? No, Luffy sniffled. Because we're friends. Ace looked at Izuku. And you fought with me. That's what friends do, Izuku said, nursing his bleeding hand. Ace looked down. His shoulders shook. I thought everyone wanted me dead. I thought my existence was a curse. Izuku walked over. He placed a hand on Ace's shoulder. It was a gesture he had used 1,000 times as a pro hero, but never had it felt this heavy. You're here, Ace, Izuku said firmly. You're alive. And as long as you're alive, you can be anything. You're not cursed. You're just you. Ace looked up. There were tears in his eyes, though he tried to hide them. I hate you guys, Ace whispered, his voice trembling. I know, Izuku smiled. I love you guys! Luffy cheered, jumping onto both of them, stretching his arms to wrap them in a hug. That evening, as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, 3 boys sat on the cliff edge. A 4th boy, a blonde with a missing tooth named Sabo, had joined them from the bushes, having watched the fight. Ace poured sake into 4 red cups. I heard that if you exchange cups of sake, you become brothers, Ace said, looking a bit embarrassed. Brothers? Luffy cheered. I suppose I can deal with you idiots, Sabo grinned. Izuku looked at the cup. In his old life, he was an only child. He had friends, sure. He had Class 1A. But this was different. This was a bond forged in blood and survival. I have a dream, Ace said, holding up his cup. To be a pirate and win, and become famous. To prove I lived, I'm gonna write a book, Sabo declared. I'm gonna see the world and write about everything. I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Luffy shouted. They all looked at Izuku. Izuku stared at the reflection of the moon in his sake. He thought about All Might. He thought about the smile that saved the world. He thought about the corruption of the world government, the slavery, the pain he knew existed out there. He couldn't be a marine. The system was broken. He couldn't be a typical pirate. He didn't want to pillage. He raised his cup. I want to save everyone, Izuku said, his voice steady. I want to be a hero. A free hero. Someone who sails the seas and protects those who can't protect themselves. I want to create a world where people can smile without fear, Ace grinned. A hero pirate? That sounds contradictory. Maybe, Izuku smiled, the ghost of Deku shining through. But I'll make it work. Cheers! 4 cups clinked. As the liquid went down, burning his throat, Izuku Midoriya felt the cold memory of his death finally fade away. He wasn't dead. He was alive. He was a brother, and his adventure was just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in the wooden roof of the Dayton family hideout, casting beams of dust-smoke-filled light across the floorboards. The air smelled of stale sweat, pine needles, and the distinct, savory aroma of roasting meat. Izuku Midoriya sat cross-legged on the floor, a makeshift pestle and mortar in his lap. He was grinding herbs, a mixture of medicinal grasses he'd identified in the forest that bore a striking chemical resemblance to aloe and antiseptic leaves from his old world. His hands, small and scarred, moved with a rhythmic precision that betrayed a lifetime of experience not belonging to a 10-year-old body. Across the room, 3 lumps lay under a heap of dirty blankets. One was snoring with a force that rattled the window frames, Garp's grandson, Luffy. One was sleeping silently, curled into a tight, defensive ball, Ace. The 3rd spot was empty. Izuku sighed, wiping a smudge of green paste from his cheek. It had been 3 days since the incident with Porchimi. 3 days since they had dragged a battered Luffy back to the hut. 3 days since the dynamic of MT Kulubo had fundamentally shifted. The door to the room creaked open. Dayton stood there, looking more haggard than usual. She held a lit cigarette in one hand and a ladle in the other. A green bean, she rasped, her voice like gravel in a blender. Stop grinding weeds. Breakfast is ready. If those 2 don't wake up, I'm eating their share. Izuku looked up, his large green eyes calm. They need the rest, Dayton-san. Luffy's cellular regeneration is accelerated, likely due to the caloric density of the meat he ate yesterday combined with his devil fruit physiology. But Ace is still nursing a bruised rib. Dayton blinked. She stared at him for a long moment, the ash from her cigarette defying gravity. Stop talking like a scientist. It's creepy. Just wake them up. She stomped away. Izuku smiled faintly. He had learned that Dayton's hostility was 90% volume and 10% actual malice. She had, after all, allowed him to use her kitchen to brew medicines. He set the mortar down and crawled over to the sleeping boys. He poked Luffy's cheek. It stretched inward like soft dough. Luffy. Meat. Luffy's eyes snapped open. Meat? He sat up so fast his head collided with Ace's chin. Ow! Ace roared, shoving Luffy off him. Watch it, you rubber idiot. It's morning. Luffy cheered, completely ignoring Ace's anger. He looked at Izuku, beaming. Izuku! Is there meat? Dayton made stew, Izuku said. He reached out, grabbing Ace's arm as the older boy tried to stand. Hold on. Let me check the wrap. Ace stiffened. He glared at Izuku, his dark eyes flashing with that familiar, prickly defensive wall. I'm fine. Let go. Your intercostal muscles were strained, Izuku recited, his fingers gently probing Ace's side. If you move too fast, you'll tear the healing tissue. Then you can't fight. Do you want to be unable to fight? Ace gritted his teeth but didn't pull away. This was the new normal. Before the Porchimi incident, Ace would have bitten Izuku's hand. Now, there was a reluctant, begrudging tolerance. Izuku had bled for them. In the currency of the wild, that bought you the right to touch. It's fine, Ace muttered, looking away. It doesn't hurt. Liar, Izuku said cheerfully. But it's healing well. Come on. If we don't hurry, Dayton really will eat everything. The forest of empty Kulubo was a green ocean, vast and teeming with life that wanted to kill you. For Izuku, it was a training ground that surpassed even the UA gyms. After breakfast, which involved Luffy nearly biting Magra's hand off, the three boys set out. The destination was the edge of the forest, near the Great Gray Terminal. Where are we going? Luffy asked, trailing behind them, swinging his arms like pendulums. Are we hunting tigers? We're meeting Sabo, Ace said, adjusting the iron pipe strapped to his back. He glanced at Izuku. You're coming too. It wasn't a question. It was an order, Sabo. Izuku muttered, tapping his chin. The blonde boy from the cliff? The one with the missing tooth? Yeah, Ace said. He's the smart one. He shot a look at Izuku. Before you showed up and started using big words anyway. They moved through the trees. Izuku watched Ace move. The boy was a natural athlete, explosive power, low center of gravity. But he was raw. He fought like a beast cornered, full of wasted movement and unnecessary rage. Luffy was even worse. He had zero form, relying entirely on the chaotic physics of his rubber body. I need to write this down, Izuku thought, his fingers twitching for a pen he didn't have. Luffy needs balance training. Ace needs anger management and joint manipulation techniques. They arrived at a massive tree near the edge of the terminal. High up in the branches, a makeshift fort was visible. A rope ladder tumbled down. Ace. Luffy! A voice called out. Sabo slid down the rope, landing gracefully. He wore a top hat with goggles, a blue jacket, and carried a pipe similar to Ace's. He looked at Izuku with narrowed, calculating eyes. So, Sabo said, crossing his arms. This is the green ghost everyone's talking about. Izuku bowed politely. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Sabo-kun. Sabo blinked, taken aback by the formality. Yeah? Nice to meet you. He looked at Ace. Is he always this polite? He's weird, Ace grunted. But he can fight. He saved me. Luffy chimed in, stretching his neck to look Sabo in the eye. He caught a spiked glove with his bare hand. It went clang. Sabo's expression sharpened. He walked around Izuku, inspecting him like a piece of merchandise. Ace told me what happened with Bluejam's crew. You took out Porchimi's knees. Tactical. I like that. He was leaving his center mass open, Izuku explained, falling into his analysis mode. He relied too much on the reach of his sword. Once you step inside the guard radius, a long blade becomes a liability. Ace provided the distraction, creating a 0.8-second window for a counteroffensive. Sabo stared. Ace stared. Luffy picked his nose. See? Ace gestured vaguely. Weird. Sabo grinned, a sharp, toothy expression. I think useful is the word. Hey Izuku. We're trying to save up money for a pirate ship. We usually mug thugs in the terminal or hunt, but the pickings have been slim. You got any ideas? Izuku looked toward the gray terminal, a smoking, festering mountain of trash that stretched to the horizon. It was a graveyard of the Goa Kingdom's excess, but to Izuku, who had grown up studying support items and hero gear, it looked like something else. One man's trash is another man's treasure, Izuku murmured. The Goa Kingdom nobles throw away things they consider broken or out of fashion. But raw materials, copper, tungsten, intact mechanisms, Those don't stop being valuable just because they're dirty. He looked at the trio. Do you guys know what copper wire looks like when it's oxidized? They shook their heads. Izuku smiled, and for a second, the shadow of the number 1 hero flickered behind him. Follow me. We're going to triple your earnings today. The great terminal was a hell's cape. Smoke hung low, stinging the eyes. The ground was an unstable mixture of rotting food, rusted metal, and broken glass. Izuku led the way, a rag tied over his nose and mouth. He moved with a strange, hopping gait, bounding from stable pile to stable pile. Stop looking for wallets, Izuku instructed, his voice muffled. Look for machines. Old clocks. Broken engines from the small boats the nobles use. Why? Ace asked, kicking a rusted bucket. Engines are heavy. Because of the magnets, Izuku said, stopping by a crushed pile of debris. He crouched down, his fingers digging into the muck. He pulled out a heavy, grease-stained alternator. Inside this is copper winding. If we strip it, the scrap dealer near the coast will pay 10 times more for pure copper than he will for a few stolen coins. He tossed the alternator to Ace, who caught it with a grunt. Whoa! Heavy. I found a clock! Luffy yelled, holding up a grandfather clock that was missing its face. Good! Izuku called back. Brass gears. Keep it! For the next 3 hours, the 4 of them worked like a specialized salvage crew. Sabo and Ace provided the muscle, hauling the heavy items. Luffy used his stretching arms to reach precarious piles that would collapse under normal weight. Izuku was the scanner, his eyes darting around, identifying value where others saw junk. He was using haki. It was subtle, barely a whisper of power. In his previous life, danger sense had been a screaming alarm. Here, his developing observation haki was more like a quiet intuition. He could feel the density of objects, the intent of the people watching them from the shadows. 3 targets, Izuku whispered suddenly, freezing. Ace and Sabo dropped their loads instantly, grabbing their pipes. Luffy bounced into a fighting stance. From behind a wall of burning tires, 5 men emerged. They were grimy, holding jagged knives and broken bottles. Terminal thugs. Look at that, the leader sneered, revealing yellow teeth. Little brats doing our work for us. Leave the copper, run along home, and maybe we won't cut you. Ace stepped forward, his face darkening. Try it, old man. Formation B. Izuku barked. The command was automatic, authoritative. The boys didn't even think, they just reacted to the tone. Luffy, suppress the center. Izuku ordered. Sabo, take the left flank. Ace, right. I have the leader, don't order me around. Ace yelled, but he was already moving to the right. Luffy inhaled, his chest expanding like a balloon. Gomu no. Pistol! His fist flew forward, stretching 10 meters to slam into the chest of the central thug. The man flew backward into a pile of trash. Sabo was a blur of blue and black. He used his pipe to vault over a thug sweep, coming down with a cracking blow to the collarbone. Izuku moved straight for the leader. The leader lunged with his knife. Die, brat! Izuku didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack. In his mind, he saw the image of green lightning. He remembered the feeling of 5% full cowl. The power wasn't there, but the pathways were. He channeled his physical strength, amplified by the adrenaline of battle and the budding haki in his muscles. He ducked under the knife, his shoulder slamming into the man's solar plexus. Smash! It wasn't a real smash. It was just a shoulder check. But Izuku's timing was perfect, using the man's own forward momentum against him. The leader gasped, the wind knocked out of him, and stumbled back. Izuku grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it using a joint lock he'd seen Eraserhead use, and forced him to drop the knife. A swift kick to the temple finished the job. It was over in 20 seconds. The thugs lay groaning in the dirt. The boys stood amidst their pile of scrap, breathing hard but unharmed. Sabo looked at the fallen men, then at Izuku. He adjusted his hat. Okay. Formation B worked. What's Formation A? Run away, Izuku deadpanned. Luffy laughed, a shishishi sound that echoed in the smog. That was fun! Izuku is like a commander. Ace wiped his nose, smearing soot across his face. He looked at Izuku, a grudging respect in his eyes. You fight like a marine, he muttered. All tactics and orders. Heroes need tactics too, Izuku said, picking up his sack of copper. If you just rush in, you can't protect anyone. Come on. Let's cash this in. They made a killing. The scrap dealer, a shady man with an eye patch, tried to lowball them, but Izuku rattled off the current market exchange rates for raw copper in the Goa Kingdom until the man grumbled and paid them properly. They walked back to the forest as the sun began to dip, their pockets heavy with berries. We can buy so much ramen. Luffy cheered. We're saving it for the ship, idiot. Ace bonked him on the head. They stopped at a clearing near the cliffs. The ocean stretched out before them, endless and glittering gold in the sunset. The wind was picking up, smelling of salt and freedom. Sabo sat on a large tree stump, counting the money. With this, we're almost halfway to buying a decent sloop. Not a great one, but one that floats. We need a ship that can survive the Grand Line, Ace said, sitting on the grass. We're not just sailing around the East Blue. We're going to the top. Izuku stood near the edge of the cliff, looking at the horizon. The vastness of this world still staggered him. No quirks. Just an endless ocean filled with monsters and mysteries. Hey, Izuku, Sabo asked, closing the money bag. You said you want to be a hero. But in this world, heroes are the Marines. And Marines protect the nobles who made this trash heap. You really want to be one of them? Izuku turned. The wind caught his unruly green hair. The Marines call themselves Justice, Izuku said softly. But justice isn't something you wear. It's something you do. He walked over to them and sat down. Where I come from, there were heroes everywhere. It was a job. You got paid, you had fans. But the best of them, the real ones, they didn't do it for that. They did it because when they saw someone crying, their bodies moved on their own. He looked at Ace. You hate the Marines because they hunt you for who your father is, right? Ace froze. The air temperature seemed to drop. Who told you about my father? No one, Izuku lied smoothly. He couldn't explain he knew it from a manga he read in another life, or simply deduced it from the way Garp acted. But I see how you look at the world. You think the world hates you. The Marines enforced that world. So you hate them. Ace gripped his pipe, his knuckles white. I don't want to be a Marine, Izuku continued. I can't follow orders from people who look at the Great Terminal and think it's acceptable to let people rot there. But I won't be a pirate who hurts people either. Then what are you? Sabo asked, fascinated. I'll be a free hero, Izuku smiled. I'll sail the seas. If I see a pirate hurting people, I'll stop them. If I see a Marine hurting people, I'll stop them too. I'll define my own justice. Luffy's eyes were sparkling stars. So, you're a mystery hero. Sure, Luffy, Izuku laughed. A mystery hero. Ace unclenched his hands. He looked at Izuku for a long time. You're crazy. You'll have the whole world chasing you. Pirates will hate you. Marines will execute you. I know, Izuku said. The image of Shigaraki, of the war, flashed in his mind. But I'm used to chasing impossible things. A week later, the bond was solidified in blood and sake. It started with a challenge. Ace, feeling the need to reassert his dominance as the strongest, or perhaps just wanting to test Izuku's limits, challenged Izuku to a spar. No weapons, Ace said, cracking his knuckles. Just fists. Okay, Izuku agreed, setting down his basket of gathered fruits. They fought in the clearing. Sabo and Luffy watched, eating apples. It was brutal. Ace was stronger, faster, and had a feral durability. But Izuku was annoying. He predicted Ace's punches. He deflected. He used Ace's anger to bait him into overextending, but Izuku was also limited by his child body. He didn't have the stamina Ace had. After 20 minutes, they were both bruised and panting. Ace roared and charged, a haymaker aimed at Izuku's head. Izuku breathed in. Total concentration breathing. Wait, wrong universe. He focused his haki. He caught Ace's fist. The impact skidded him back 3 feet, digging trenches in the dirt. You stop thinking when you're angry, Izuku yelled, twisting Ace's arm and flipping him over his hip. Ace hit the ground but used the bounce to kick Izuku in the stomach. Izuku went flying, hitting a tree. I don't need to think to kick your ass, Ace shouted. They scrambled up, ready to go again, but stopped when they heard clapping. Droll Sabo declared. Izuku can't knock Ace out, and Ace can't land a clean finisher on Izuku. Luffy jumped up. My turn! My turn! No, Ace and Izuku said in unison. They collapsed onto the grass, breathing heavily. You're strong, Ace admitted, staring at the sky. You're stronger, Izuku wheezed. If I didn't read your movements, you would have broken my nose 3 times. Teach me, Ace said. Izuku turned his head. Huh, that thing you do. Where you know where I'm going to hit. And that thing where your skin gets hard, Izuku smiled. It's called hockey. And I'm still learning it too. But we can learn together. That evening, Ace stole a bottle of sake from Dayton's stash. They gathered around the tree stump in the secret base. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. The forest was alive with the sound of cicadas. Ace placed 4 red cups on the stump. He poured the clear liquid into each one. You know, Ace started, his voice a bit shaky. I heard that if you exchange cups of sake, you become brothers. Luffy's eyes went wide. Brothers? Yeah, Ace said. He looked at Sabo, then at Izuku. We might not be on the same crew one day. Luffy wants to be king. Sabo wants to write a book. Izuku wants to be whatever he is. A hero. But Ace continued, no matter where we are, or what we do, this bond will tie us together. He picked up his cup. Being a pirate, being a hero, it's lonely, Ace said softly. But if we're brothers, we're never really alone. Right. Sabo picked up his cup, grinning. I always wanted a troublesome younger brother. Now I have 2. And a weird green one. Hey! Izuku laughed, picking up his cup. His hand trembled slightly. In his past life, he had friends. He had mentors. But he had always carried the burden of one for all alone. He was the 9th. The vessel. He had to leave Yui to protect them. He had to break himself to save them. But here, he wasn't the chosen one. He wasn't the symbol of peace's successor. He was just Izuku. He was just a brother. Brothers, Izuku whispered. The word felt like a shield. Luffy grabbed his cup with both hands. I'm gonna be the strongest brother. And I'll protect you guys. Idiot, we're protecting you, Ace scoffed, but he was smiling. A real smile. Not a smirk, not a sneer. A smile that reached his eyes. To the future. Sabo toasted. To being free. Ace shouted. To being king. Luffy yelled. Izuku raised his cup high. To saving everyone with a smile. They brought the cups together. Clink. The sake was terrible. It burned Izuku's throat and tasted like rubbing alcohol and bad decisions. He coughed, his eyes watering. It's gross. Luffy stuck his tongue out. It's grown-up juice, Ace said, trying to look cool despite his own grimace. Sabo laughed. Izuku wiped his mouth, the taste lingering. Ace, Izuku said, setting the cup down. Yeah? Izuku looked at the boy who, in another timeline, had a hole punched through his chest because he thought his life had no value. Thank you, Izuku said. For letting me in. Ace pulled his hat down over his eyes to hide his face. His ears were red. Shut up. Don't make it weird. It's already weird. Luffy laughed, wrapping his rubber arms around all 3 of them, pulling them into a chaotic, suffocating hug. Can't breathe. Sabo wheezed. Luffy, let go. Ace yelled. Izuku didn't struggle. He let himself be crushed by the rubber limbs, surrounded by the warmth of his new family. He closed his eyes. All might. Mom, everyone. I'm okay. I'm starting over. And I promise, this time, I won't let anyone die. 2 years later. The passage of time on Mt. Kaluba was marked by the seasons and the increasing bounties on the local wildlife's heads, placed unofficially by the boys. Izuku was 12 now. He had grown taller, though he was still leaner than Ace. His green hair was a wild mane tied back with a piece of leather. He wore combat boots he had cobbled together himself, and a sleeveless vest that showed off arms corded with lean, dense muscle. He stood on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a massive bear, the lord of the southern forest. Ace and Sabo were flanking it. Luffy was acting as bait, bouncing around and making faces. Okay, Izuku muttered, his eyes narrowing. He felt the hum of power in his body. Over the last 2 years, He had obsessively trained to recreate the effects of one for all using Haki. He couldn't stockpile power. He couldn't smash buildings with air pressure alone yet. But he had mastered flow. He channeled his armament Haki. It didn't coat his skin in black armor yet. He wasn't there. Instead, it acted like an invisible exoskeleton, reinforcing his bones and ligaments. Full cowl, 8%, he whispered. It was a bluff, a name for a feeling, but it worked. Green sparks, generated by the sheer friction and static of his Haki interacting with the environment, crackled around him. Now! Ace yelled. Ace leaped, his pipe enveloped in a rudimentary Haki that felt like fire. Sabo struck from the left, his fingers shaped like a dragon's claw. The bear roared, swiping at them. Izuku moved. He vanished from the cliff edge. He didn't fall, he launched. Shoot style, Iron Soul. He spun in the air, his leg acting as a whip. He struck the bear squarely on the top of the head at the exact moment Ace and Sabo struck the sides. Boom! The ground cratered. The bear's eyes rolled back, and it collapsed. The three boys landed in a crouch. Nice timing, Sabo grinned, dusting off his coat. You were slow, Ace smirked at Izuku. I was calculating the trajectory so I didn't break its skull completely, Izuku retorted, straightening up. We want the pelt intact, right? Meat! Luffy cheered, jumping onto the unconscious bear. Izuku looked at his hands. They were calloused, scarred, and strong. He pulled out a small, tattered notebook from his back pocket. It was Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14, One Piece Edition. He opened it to a page titled Goals. 1. Master Armament Haki, Current Status, Basic Hardening Achieved. 2. Master Observation Haki, Current Status, Good Danger Sense, Low Precognition. 3. Conqueror's Haki, Status, Uncontrollable Bursts. 4. Protect Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. He looked at the fourth point. He tapped the charcoal pencil against the paper. Everything was going well. They were strong. They were happy. But in the back of his mind, a nagging memory persisted. A memory of a celestial dragon. A burning terminal. A boat. Izuku looked at Sabo, who was laughing with Luffy. The timeline was approaching. Izuku closed the book with a snap. Not this time, he whispered to the wind. I change fate. He joined his brothers, ready to drag the massive bear back home. The air in the gray terminal tasted different that morning. To the untrained nose, it was the usual cocktail of rotting garbage, sulfur, and the sea. But to Izuku Midoriya, who had spent the last 2 years honing his senses to a razor's edge, it tasted like accelerant. It tasted like oil. Izuku stood atop a pile of rusted scrap metal, looking out over the sprawling wasteland of the terminal. The sun was high, beating down on the endless mounds of trash, but the heat Izuku felt wasn't solar. It was a premonition. You're doing that thing with your face again, a voice called out. Izuku blinked, snapping out of his trance. Ace was climbing up the mound, a heavy sack of scavenged loot over his shoulder. At 12 years old, Ace was leaning out, his muscles corded and tough. He had the look of a young wolf, dangerous and perpetually on edge. What thing? Izuku asked, adjusting the heavy gloves he wore. That thing where you look like you're trying to solve a math problem that involves explosions, Ace grunted, dropping the sack. Relax. We made a killing today. Blue Jam's paying double for the heavy crates. Izuku looked at the crates stacked near the edge of the forest. Blue Jam, the pirate captain who ran the terminal's underworld, had hired them for a special job. Moving cargo, distributing barrels of fuel to strategic points around the terminal. Ace, Izuku said quietly. Why does a pirate crew need this much oil spread out over the entire trash heap? Why are they blocking the exits? Ace frowned, wiping sweat from his forehead. They said it was for a cleanup. To burn specific piles to make room for the royal procession tomorrow. The celestial dragon is coming, remember? Celestial dragon. The term sent a shiver down Izuku's spine that had nothing to do with cold. In his previous life, he had dealt with corrupt bureaucrats and villains who thought they were gods. But the world nobles, they were something else. They were a systemic cancer that made All for One look almost reasonable in his chaotic desires. It's too much oil, Ace, Izuku whispered. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his observation Haki. It was still a fuzzy static in his mind, Not the crystal-clear danger sense of the fourth user, but he could feel intent. The intent radiating from Blue Jam's men wasn't industrious. It was malicious. It was the frantic, desperate energy of men who knew they were digging their own graves. Izuku? Ace's voice lost its edge. What do you think is happening? They aren't clearing space, Izuku said, opening his eyes. His green irises were hard. They're going to burn it all. The trash. The houses. The people. Ace stiffened. That's insane. The king wouldn't. The king wants a clean view for the world, noble, Izuku interrupted. To people like that, we are the trash. The realization hit the trio like a physical blow. Sabo, who had joined them moments later, confirmed Izuku's fears. He had overheard the nobles talking in the high town. The plan wasn't renovation, it was incineration. The sun began to set. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the massive gates connecting the terminal to the forest, and safety, began to creak shut. We have to get everyone out, Luffy shouted, panic rising in his voice. He was only 9. The concept of mass murder was too big for his rubbery heart to hold. The gates are closing, Sabo yelled, pointing. We can't stop the soldiers, Ace grit his teeth, gripping his pipe until his knuckles turned white. There are too many. Izuku took a deep breath. The familiar sensation of adrenaline flooded his system. It was the same feeling he had during the war against the Paranormal Liberation Front. The stakes were life and death. Listen to me. Izuku's voice cut through the panic. It wasn't the voice of a child. It was the voice of a hero who had commanded squadrons. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy froze, looking at him. We cannot fight the army right now, Izuku said rapidly, his mind processing variables. If we attack the gates, we get pinned down and burn with everyone else. We need to create a survival pocket. A what? Luffy asked. Blue Jam, Izuku said. He's the key. He thinks he's getting a pardon, but the king is going to burn him too. Villains don't share power. If we can get to Blue Jam, we can force him to open a path, or use his ship. And if he refuses? Ace asked, hefting his pipe. Then we take him down, Izuku said. Sabo, you know the layout of the northern trash mounds. Is there a fire break? No, Sabo shook his head, looking pale. It's all flammable. Everything. Boom. The first explosion rocked the ground. It started in the east. A massive pillar of orange flame roared into the sky, illuminating the horrified faces of the terminal's residents. Then another in the west. Then the north. The ring of fire was complete. Run! Izuku screamed. The great terminal became hell on earth in minutes. The heat was instantaneous and suffocating. The air turned into thick, black smoke that tasted of burning plastic and roasted meat. Screams erupted from every direction, men, women, children, scrambling over piles of garbage that were rapidly turning into pyres. Don't breathe the smoke, Izuku ordered, ripping strips of cloth from his tunic and soaking them in a puddle of muddy water. He tossed them to his brothers. Tie these over your mouths. Stay low. They moved as a unit. Izuku took point, his eyes streaming with tears from the smoke, but his focus absolute. Danger sense. Danger sense. Use it. He forced his haki outward. He felt the collapsing tower of tires to his left before it fell. Right. Izuku shoved Luffy hard. A split second later, a burning mountain of rubber crashed exactly where Luffy had been standing. Thanks, Saizu. Luffy coughed, his eyes wide with terror. Keep moving. They encountered a group of residents trapped by a wall of flames. An old woman and 2 children were huddled against a rusted ship hull. We can't leave them, Sabo yelled. We aren't, Izuku snapped. He looked at the blockade, a pile of burning timber. He didn't have one for all. He couldn't just smash the air pressure to blow the fire out. He had to be smarter. He had to use physics. Ace. Sabo. The base of that pile is weak. Izuku pointed to a charged support beam. Hit it together. On my mark. Ace and Sabo didn't question him. They rushed forward, pipes raised. Now, crack. The pipes struck the timber with the force of desperation. The beam shattered. The burning pile collapsed inward, creating a ramp of relatively clear debris. Go! Move! Up the ramp! Izuku ushered the civilians. Cover your heads. They scrambled up and over, disappearing into the slightly cooler air of the central clearing. But the fire was closing in. The central clearing was just the eye of the storm. And standing in the middle of it, surrounded by his panicked crew, was Blue Jam. The pirate captain looked deranged. He was pounding on the massive steel gate that led to the nobles' district. The gate the king had promised would open. It remained shut. Open it! Blue Jam screamed, firing his pistol at the steel. I did what you asked? I burned the trash. Let me in! Izuku, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy burst into the clearing. Blue Jam turned. His eyes were bloodshot, manic. When he saw the boys, his fear transmuted instantly into rage. You brats! Blue Jam snarled. You knew! You knew they were going to betray me! We told you! Ace shouted, stepping forward. The nobles don't care about scum like us. You were just a tool! Blue Jam roared, pointing his sword at Ace. If I'm going to burn, I'm taking you with me. You and your treasure! We don't have time for this! Izuku yelled, stepping up beside Ace. Blue Jam! The gate isn't opening. We need to break through the forest side. If we work together, shut up! Blue Jam lunged. The fight was chaotic and desperate. The heat was so intense that the very air seemed to warp. Blue Jam was a seasoned pirate, strong and vicious, and his crew, though panicked, followed his lead. Ace met Blue Jam head-on. The clash of pipe against sword sent sparks flying. Die, you demon brat! Blue Jam screamed, kicking Ace in the stomach. Ace flew back, skidding across the hot ash. Blue Jam raised his sword for the killing blow. Sabo! Luffy! Suppression fire! Izuku ordered. Luffy stretched his arm, grabbing a burning piece of debris. Goma Goma no! Rocket! He launched himself not at Blue Jam, but at the ground in front of him, kicking up a cloud of blinding, burning ash. Blue Jam flinched. Sabo came in from the side, his pipe spinning. He struck Blue Jam's wrist, numbing the hand holding the sword, and then Izuku was there. He moved through the smoke like a phantom. He was channeling every ounce of haki he could muster into his legs. His muscles screamed, tearing slightly under the strain of forcing a child's body to move at hero speeds. One for all style, 5% imitation. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He used his momentum to sweep Blue Jam's legs while simultaneously driving his elbow into the pirate's solar plexus. Stay down! Izuku roared. Blue Jam hit the ground, wheezing. But he was tough. He reached for a pistol dropped in the mud. Bang! The bullet grazed Izuku's cheek, drawing a line of red. Izuku! Luffy screamed. Blue Jam scrambled up, aiming the gun at Luffy. I'll kill the little one first. Izuku's world narrowed. The heat, the fire, the noise, it all faded. All he saw was the gun. All he saw was Luffy. Move! He was too far. He couldn't reach in time, but someone else could. A massive shadow descended from the smoke. A fist, hard as iron, slammed into the top of Blue Jam's head. Crunch! Blue Jam was driven into the ground up to his waist. Standing there, panting, covered in burns, was Dayton. The mountain bandit boss looked terrifying. Don't you touch my brats! She screeched, wielding an axe. Dayton? The boys shouted in unison. Don't just stand there! Dayton yelled, turning to face the wall of fire that was rapidly consuming the clearing. We're trapped. The fire, there's nowhere to go. Izuku looked around. She was right. The flames had encircled them completely. The heat was blistering. His skin felt like it was cracking. The oxygen was vanishing. Think. Think like a hero. What would All Might do? He would smash the fire. What would Endeavor do? He would control it. I can't do either. He looked at the wall of flame. He needed a path. He needed a miracle. And then, the wind changed. It wasn't a natural breeze. It was a pressure drop so sudden it popped Izuku's ears. The roar of the fire was silenced for a heartbeat. Izuku felt it. A presence. Massive. Revolutionary. Green and stormy. He looked up. Standing atop the high wall of the town, silhouetted against the burning sky, was a man in a cloak. He had a tattoo on his face. The man raised a hand. Whoosh! A blast of wind, concentrated and razor-sharp, sliced through the center of the gray terminal. It didn't just blow the fire out, it physically parted the flames like the Red Sea. A perfectly clear path, 10 meters wide, opened up through the inferno, leading straight to the ocean. The path is open! Izuku screamed, his voice cracking. Run! Everyone run! The residents of the terminal didn't need to be told twice. They surged forward, a river of humanity flowing through the corridor of wind. Izuku grabbed Luffy. Dayton grabbed Ace. Sabo was right beside them. They sprinted. As they ran, Izuku looked back one last time. The man on the wall was gone. Dragon, Izuku thought, the name surfacing from the wanted posters he'd studied. Luffy's father. They burst out of the flames and onto the rocky shore of the ocean. The cool sea air hit them, and they collapsed, gasping, alive. The next morning, the sun rose over a blackened scar on the island. The great terminal was gone, replaced by smoking ash. But the high town was pristine, flags waving, bands playing. The celestial dragon had arrived. The contrast made Izuku sick. He sat in the bandit hideout, bandaging Ace's burns. The mood was somber. They had survived, but they had seen the true face of the world. I can't stay here, Sabo whispered. He was sitting in the corner, clutching his bag. His face was clean, his clothes changed, but his eyes were haunted. Sabo? Ace asked, wincing as Izuku applied salve. The nobles, my parents. Sabo's voice shook. They're celebrating. They're celebrating the fire. They're saying it smells cleaner now. He stood up. I can't breathe in this country. I'm leaving. I'm setting sail today. Today? Luffy cried. But we don't have a ship. We just have a little boat. A boat is enough, Sabo said firmly. He looked at his brothers. I'm sorry. I can't wait until I'm 17. If I stay here one more day, I'll rot. I'll become like them. Izuku stood up. He walked over to Sabo and gripped his shoulders. Sabo, Izuku said intensely. The sea is dangerous. Especially today. The celestial dragon's ship is in the harbor. I'll be careful, Sabo promised, forcing a smile. I'll steer clear of the big ships. I just need to get away from this island. He pulled his hat down. We're brothers. No matter where I am. Remember? Yeah, Ace choked out. Sabo hugged them, quick and desperate, and then ran out the door. Izuku watched him go. A knot formed in his stomach. A terrible, heavy knot that tasted like iron. Danger sense. It wasn't a spike. It was a low, throbbing warning. I have to go, Izuku said suddenly. Where? Ace demanded. Izuku, you're hurt. You inhaled too much smoke. I need to make sure he clears the harbor, Izuku lied. He grabbed his boots. I'll be back. He didn't wait for a response. He bolted out the door. Izuku ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in this life. He used full cow, pushing the limit to 15%, ignoring the tearing sensation in his hamstrings. He bounded through the trees, vaulting over roots, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Please be wrong. Please be wrong. Please be wrong. He burst out of the tree line and onto the cliff overlooking the harbor entrance. Below, the sea was sparkling blue. A massive, gaudy ship with sails emblazoned with the world government crest was gliding slowly out of the port. It was colossal, a floating palace, and there, bobbing in the waves, was a tiny fishing boat. Sabo's boat. He was trying to cross the path of the celestial dragon's ship. No! Izuku screamed, though Sabo couldn't hear him from this height. Sabo! Turn back! On the deck of the massive ship, Izuku's enhanced vision picked out a figure. A man in a bulky white suit and a bubble helmet. He was holding a large bazooka. The intent hit Izuku like a physical slap. The noble wasn't aiming at a pirate. He was aiming at filth that dared to cross his path. Izuku didn't think. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. He moved. He leaped from the cliff. It was madness. The drop was hundreds of feet. The distance to the boat was massive. In his old life, with float and black whip, this would have been trivial. Now, it was suicide. But he was a hero. And a hero moved when a body couldn't. One for all. Izuku roared, summoning every dormant ember of power, every scrap of haki, every ounce of hysterical strength. He kicked the air. Jeppo? No, it wasn't refined enough. It was just a brute force shockwave against the atmosphere. It barely slowed him, but it propelled him forward. He was falling toward the water, angling toward the line of fire. The celestial dragon pulled the trigger. Boom! The heavy shell arced through the air, whistling death. Izuku was falling. He calculated the trajectory. He wasn't going to reach Sabo. He was too slow. Gravity was too strong. I can't catch it. I have to deflect it. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a heavy iron ball, one of Garp's training baseballs he had pocketed weeks ago. He spun in the air, his body a tight coil. He poured all his hockey into the ball. Smash! He threw the iron ball. It flew true. It intercepted the bazooka shell in midair, 50 feet above Sabo's boat. Kaboom! The explosion was deafening. Because the shell exploded early, it didn't obliterate the boat directly. But the shockwave was massive. The blast wave slammed into the tiny fishing vessel like a hammer of God. Izuku shielded his face as the heat wave hit him. He plummeted into the ocean, hitting the water with a bone-jarring splash. Darkness took him for a moment. He kicked upward, lungs burning. He broke the surface, gasping. Sabo! He screamed. The smoke cleared. The fishing boat was gone. Only splintered wood remained, burning on the surface of the water. No! Izuku paddled frantically toward the debris. Sabo! Sabo! He dove. He swam through the wreckage. He found a piece of the black top hat floating, scorched and torn. He found a blue coat shredded, but there was no body. Izuku surfaced, treading water, surrounded by fire and driftwood. He scanned the horizon with desperate eyes. The explosion was too big. The concussion alone. Tears mixed with the salt water on his face. I wasn't fast enough, Izuku choked out. I'm still too weak. He looked toward the massive ship. The celestial dragon was laughing, reloading his weapon, likely to shoot at the debris for sport. Rage, pure and white-hot, flared in Izuku's chest. For a second, his conqueror's haki lashed out, cracking the wood floating around him. He wanted to swim to that ship. He wanted to tear it apart plank by plank, but he saw the Marines lining the deck. He saw the cannons. And he remembered Ace and Luffy waiting for him. If he died here, if he threw his life away in a suicide charge, he would leave them alone. He couldn't save Sabo. He had to save himself for them. Izuku grabbed the tattered hat. He turned and began the long, agonizing swim back to the shore. The walk back to the bandit hut was the longest of his life. He arrived at sunset. He was dripping wet, shivering, clutching the burned hat to his chest. Ace and Luffy were waiting on the porch. When they saw him, they stood up, smiles dying on their faces. They saw the hat. Luffy made a sound, a small, broken whimper. Ace went pale. Izuku? Where's Sabo? Izuku fell to his knees in the dirt. He held out the hat. I tried, Izuku whispered, his voice shattered. He sailed, the celestial dragon. He shot the boat. What? Ace whispered. Shot? I tried to stop the shell, Izuku sobbed, looking at his hands. I threw. I tried, but it exploded. The boat, it's gone. Silence. A terrible, suffocating silence hung over the mountain. Then Luffy screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of grief that echoed through the trees. He fell onto the ground crying, pounding his fists into the dust. Ace didn't scream. He stared at the hat. His body began to shake. He just wanted to be free. Ace snatched the hat from Izuku. He looked at it, then at the sky. Sabo. Ace roared. Why? Why did you go? He turned and punched a tree. The wood splintered. He punched it again, and again, until his knuckles bled, until the tree cracked and fell. Izuku didn't stop him. He sat in the dirt, tears flowing freely. He remembered Night Eye. He remembered the feeling of helplessness. I have memories of a hero, Izuku thought bitterly. But I don't have the power to be one. 3 days passed in a blur of grief. Luffy cried until he passed out, woke up, and cried again. Ace sat on the cliff edge, staring at the ocean, not speaking, not eating. Izuku forced himself to move. He cooked. He cleaned. He bandaged Ace's hands. He sat with Luffy and rubbed his back until he slept. On the fourth day, a letter arrived. It had been delivered to the bandit hut by a shaky courier who looked terrified of the mountain. It was addressed to Ace and Luffy and Izuku. Ace opened it with trembling hands. Ace. Luffy. Izuku. If you're reading this, I'm already out at sea. I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly. But I couldn't stand it anymore. That place, it stifles you. It kills your soul. I'm going to be a pirate. I'm going to write a book about the world. I'm going to be free. Ace, you're the oldest. Look after Luffy. He's a crybaby, but he's strong. Izuku, you're the smart one. Keep them alive. Make sure Ace doesn't do anything stupid. I'll see you guys on the Grand Line. Sabo. Ace read the letter aloud. His voice cracked on the last line. He wrote this before he left, Ace whispered. He clutched the paper to his chest. Luffy was sniffling, wiping his eyes. Sabo. Izuku looked at the letter. He looked at his brothers. The grief was still there, heavy and sharp. But there was something else now. A resolve. Ace stood up. He wiped his face. He looked fierce. We have to live, Ace said. We have to live for him too. He looked at Luffy. Luffy. Stop crying, Luffy hiccuped. I can't. Listen to me. Ace grabbed Luffy's shoulders. Sabo entrusted me with you. And he entrusted Izuku with us. I'm never gonna die. I promise. Luffy's eyes widened. You promise? I promise. Ace shouted. And I won't let you die either. Or Izuku. We're gonna be the freest men on the sea. Ace turned to Izuku. Izuku, Ace said. You said you were too weak. That you couldn't save him. Izuku nodded, looking down. Then get stronger, Ace demanded. We all have to get stronger. So strong that nobody can ever take anything from us again. So strong that we can fight the nobles, the marines, the pirates, the whole damn world. Izuku looked up. He saw the fire in Ace's eyes. It was the same fire he had seen in the embers of One for All. Yes, Izuku said, standing up. I will. I swear. He clenched his fists. I won't rely on the ghosts of my past anymore. I won't just imitate All Might. I have to build something new. Something that works in this world. I have Haki. I have my mind. I have my brothers. I'm going to be a hero, Izuku said, his voice steady. But not the kind the world wants. The kind the world needs. I'll make sure nobody has to cry like this again. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Luffy yelled, raising a tear-stained fist. And I'm gonna make a name for myself, Ace vowed. A name that reaches the heavens, so Sabo can hear it. The three boys stood on the cliff, silhouetted against the setting sun. The ocean was vast and cruel, but they faced it together. Izuku Midoriya looked at the horizon. Deep down, a tiny part of him, the part that defied logic, the part that believed in miracles, hoped. I didn't see a body, he thought. And that man. Dragon, he was there. Maybe. Just maybe. But until I know for sure, I carry your dream, Sabo. The wind blew, carrying the scent of salt and the promise of a storm. The prologue was over. The story was about to begin. The jungle of MT Kalubo was a crucible. It did not care about your dreams, your trauma, or your lineage. It only cared about the food chain. And for the last few years, the three boys living in the bandits' hideout had fought tooth and nail to climb to the top of it. But there was a ghost in the forest. Not a literal one, though the misty mornings made it feel that way. It was the absence of a top hat and a gap-toothed grin. Sabo's death, for they had no proof of life, only the wreckage of a boat and the cruelty of a celestial dragon, hung over them like a shroud. It changed them. Ace became quieter, his rage compressing into a dense, high-gravity core of determination. Luffy became louder, his desperate need to prove his strength manifesting in reckless challenges against beasts 10 times his size. And Izuku? Izuku Midoriya became a scientist of violence. Year 1, the Foundation, age 11. Again, Izuku panted, wiping mud from his eyes. He was standing in a river, the water rushing past his waist. Across from him stood Ace, wielding his iron pipe with murderous intent. You're overthinking it, Ace growled, spinning the pipe. Just hit me. I can't just hit you, Izuku muttered, his eyes darting around. analyzing Ace's stance, the slippery riverbed, the angle of the sun. If I strike your left shoulder, you'll pivot and use the pipe's length to sweep my legs. My current muscle density isn't high enough to tank that hit without hockey reinforcement, and my hockey reserves are at 12% capacity. Shut up! Ace roared, lunging forward. The pipe came down with a whoosh. In his old life, Izuku would have used full cowl to dodge. Green lightning would have flared, and he would have been gone. But the lightning was gone. The stockpile of power that All Might had given him was gone, but the memory of the power remained. Izuku didn't dodge. He planted his feet. He took a breath, visualizing the flow of energy. Not a quirk, but life force. Ryo, hardening. He crossed his arms. He imagined his skin turning into the black iron of a support beam. Clang. The sound echoed through the valley. It wasn't the wet thud of metal on flesh. It was the ringing of a bell. Ace's eyes went wide. The pipe vibrated in his hands, stinging his palms. Izuku stood firm. His forearms were bruised, turning a mottled purple, but the bone hadn't broken. He had successfully coated his arms in invisible armor for a split second. I did it, Izuku whispered, staring at his arms. I blocked it. You turned into iron? Ace asked, stepping back, intrigued despite himself. No, Izuku said, his mind racing, pulling out a waterproof notebook from his pocket. It's armament hockey. Garp-san uses it. It's the manifestation of spirit armor. If I can maintain this, I can recreate the durability of One for All without the physical backlash breaking my bones. Stop writing. Ace splashed water at him. Teach me how to do it. It's about will, Izuku explained, looking up. You have to want to not be hurt. You have to reject the damage. Like refusing to accept that the world can break you. Ace looked at the water. He thought about Sabo. He thought about the fire. Refusing to break, Ace repeated softly. He gripped his pipe. Yeah. I can do that. Year 3, the adolescence of monsters, age 14. Puberty hit the brothers like a freight train. Ace shot up in height, his shoulders broadening, his face losing its childish roundness and becoming angular and handsome, much to the annoyance of the few girls in town. Luffy stretched out, literally and metaphorically, becoming a gangly, rubbery teen who ate 4 times his body weight daily. Izuku grew differently. He didn't have Ace's natural bulk or Luffy's devil fruit weirdness. He built himself like a compact engine. He was shorter than Ace, but his muscles were dense, honed by thousands of hours of calisthenics. He had also started to tinker. What are those? Luffy asked one morning, poking at the strange contraptions strapped to Izuku's shins. They were metal plates, salvaged from the scraps of the gray terminal, hammered into shape and lined with leather. Iron saws, version 3, Izuku said, tightening the straps. Since I don't use a weapon like Ace, and I don't have a devil fruit like you, I need to maximize my impact force. My fighting style, shoot style, relies on kicks. These greaves add weight and protection. Plus, if I coat them in hockey. He walked over to a massive boulder the size of a house. Stand back. Izuku took a deep breath. He channeled his hockey. By now, at 14, he could turn his legs a distinct, glossy black. One for all imitation, Manchester smash. He spun in the air, his leg becoming a blur. Crack boom. The heel of his boot collided with the rock. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a spiderweb of cracks exploded outward. The boulder groaned and split in half, the 2 pieces falling away with a ground-shaking thud. Luffy's jaw dropped. Suga. Izuku is a robot. Ace, leaning against a tree, whistled low. Not bad. But you're still slow on the wind-up. I'm working on it, Izuku said, landing gracefully. He wiped sweat from his brow. Speed is the next step. I need to figure out Sora. The Marines use it to move faster than the eye can see. It involves kicking the ground 10 times in a second. 10 times? Luffy tilted his head. That sounds hard. It's physics, Izuku muttered. Explosive propulsion. Later that night, as they sat around the fire eating a roasted boar, the conversation turned serious. 3 more years, Ace said, staring into the flames. 3 more years until I'm 17. Then I'm out of here. I'm gonna be a pirate too. Luffy cheered, mouth full of meat. We know, Luffy. Izuku smiled, poking the fire with a stick. What about you, Izuku? Ace asked, looking at him sideways. You're the same age as me. You gonna sail with me? This was the question that had been hanging over them. Ace and Izuku were a duo. They were the strongest on the mountain. Everyone assumed they would captain a ship together. Izuku hesitated. He looked at Luffy. In the canon of One Piece, the story he remembered from a life that felt like a dream, Ace set sail alone. He formed the Spade Pirates. He eventually joined Whitebeard. And then Marineford. If Izuku went with Ace, he could change that. He could protect him. But then he looked at Luffy. Luffy, who was destined to be the sun god. Luffy, who would bring the dawn. Luffy, who was currently choking on a bone because he tried to swallow a leg whole. Luffy needed a guide. Ace was strong. Ace was fire. Ace would burn bright regardless. But Luffy needed a navigator of the soul. He needed someone to turn his chaotic potential into the force that would liberate the world. I can't go with you, Ace, Izuku said softly. Ace's expression hardened. Why? You think I'm not strong enough to be your captain? No, Izuku shook his head. You're going to be a great captain. But I made a promise. To Sabo. Ace flinched at the name. He told me to watch over Luffy. Izuku lied, or perhaps interpreted the letter's intent. Luffy is, well, look at him. Luffy was currently fighting a beetle. And losing. If I leave him alone for 3 years, Izuku said, he'll probably accidentally eat a poisonous frog or sail off in a barrel and drown. I need to make sure he's ready. Ace looked at Luffy, then back at Izuku. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He chuckled, a dry sound. Yeah. You're right. He's an idiot. Ace smirked. So you're gonna be his babysitter? I'm going to be his first mate, Izuku corrected, his eyes gleaming. And his strategist. You go ahead, Ace. Make a name for yourself. We'll meet you at the top. The top, huh? Ace grinned, a predatory, confident look. Whitebeard. Shanks. Kaido. I'm gonna crush them all. Don't get crushed yourself, Izuku warned. The new world is scary. I'm fire, Izuku, Ace said, his hand bursting into actual flames. He had found the Mera Mera Nomi a month prior, a discovery Izuku had practically hyperventilated over while taking notes. Fire doesn't get crushed. Year 6, the departure of Fire, age 17. The day Ace left was bright and windy. The entire Dayton family came down to the coast to see him off. Even Garp was there, standing in the back, picking his nose and pretending he wasn't proud. Ace stood on a small, customized sloop he had bought with his treasure's share. He wore his signature orange hat and no shirt, showing off his lean, muscular build. I'm off! Ace shouted, waving. Luffy! Izuku! Don't lag behind too long. I'm gonna beat you! Luffy yelled, crying snotty tears. I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Dream on, anchor! Izuku stood on the dock. He didn't cry. He had cried enough in his last life. He just smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Ace! Izuku called out. Ace looked at him. Live! Izuku shouted. Just, live! Don't let anyone take your life from you. No matter what! Ace paused. He tipped his hat. I'm not gonna die, partner. Watch the news. I'll be famous in a week. The wind caught the sail, and the striker moved out to sea. Izuku watched him go until the ship was a speck on the horizon. He felt a phantom pain in his chest, the hole that Akainu would punch through Ace in a few years if Izuku didn't change the future. I have 3 years, Izuku thought, his hands clenching into fists. 3 years to turn Luffy into a monster. 3 years to turn myself into a legend. He turned to Luffy, who was still sniffling. Luffy looked up. Yeah? Training starts now, Izuku said, his voice dropping an octave. No more games. No more playing tag. If you want to be king, you have to survive the Grand Line. And right now, you're too weak. Luffy blinked. Then, his face set into a serious line. Okay. Make me strong, Izuku. The training years, age 17 to 20, the mountain became a torture chamber. Without Ace, the dynamic shifted. It wasn't a competition anymore, it was a dojo. Izuku assumed the role of the teacher. He started by breaking down Luffy's fighting style. Your punches have range, Izuku lectured, drawing diagrams in the dirt with a stick. But they have a travel time. Against a fast opponent, stretching your arm out is just offering them a limb to cut off. So I shouldn't stretch? Luffy asked, confused. You should stretch faster, Izuku corrected. Use the elasticity. Snap it. Don't just throw it, create tension. Like a slingshot. He forced Luffy to punch trees while his arms were tangled in vines, teaching him to use torque and rotation. Gomu Gomu no Rifle was born from Izuku explaining the physics of rifling in a gun barrel to increase accuracy and piercing power. But the biggest breakthrough came when Izuku started talking about blood. They were sitting by a waterfall. Luffy was exhausted. My heart beats fast when I fight, Luffy said, clutching his chest. That's adrenaline, Izuku said. He looked at Luffy's rubber skin. Luffy, your organs are rubber too, right? Your blood vessels? Yeah. If you pumped your blood faster, like physically forced it to circulate at high pressure, you could deliver oxygen and nutrients to your muscles instantly. It would be like doping, but natural. Luffy tilted his head. Pump blood? Doping? It would make you faster, Izuku said, eyes shining. Stronger. But it would generate immense heat. You'd emit steam. Luffy stared at his legs. He squeezed them. Pump faster. Not yet, Izuku stopped him. Your body isn't ready. If you do that now, your heart might explode. But keep it in mind. We'll call it Gear Second. Izuku's evolution. While training Luffy, Izuku refined himself. He realized he would never have the raw destruction of All Might. He couldn't change the weather with a punch. So he focused on utility and precision. He mastered Jeppo, moonwalk. By kicking the air with his heavy iron boots, he could fly. He combined this with his shoot style, creating aerial maneuvers that defied gravity. He mastered observation hockey. He spent weeks blindfolded, dodging rocks thrown by Luffy, who threw them with lethal velocity. Eventually, the world became a map of auras. He could sense anger, hunger, fear. He could predict a punch 3 seconds before the muscle twitched. And he worked on his armament hockey. He wanted to project it. Ryo. The Wano technique. To destroy things from the inside. He practiced on trees. He would punch a tree, trying to blow out the back of the trunk without damaging the front bark. Day 700. Izuku stood before a massive oak. He placed his gloved hand against the bark. One for all. Air force. He flicked his finger. Pop. A blast of wind pressure, coated in invisible hockey, shot from his finger. It didn't break the bark. But on the other side of the tree, a chunk of wood exploded outward. Internal destruction, Izuku grinned, sweat dripping down his nose. It's weak, but it's there. The notebooks, Izuku wrote. He wrote about everything. Volume 1, The Biology of Fish Men. Volume 2, Devil Fruit Taxonomy. Volume 3, Marine Rank Structures and Predicted Strength Levels. Volume 4, The Straw Hat Crew, Projected. He planned. He knew they would need a navigator, Nami. A cook, Sanji. A swordsman, Zoro. A sniper, Usopp. A doctor, Chopper. A shipwright, Frankie. A musician, Brook. A archaeologist, Robin. He mapped out the East Blue. He mapped out the route. Izuku, why do you write so much? Luffy asked, hanging upside down from a branch. Because, Captain, Izuku said, closing the book. You're going to be the storm. I'm going to be the rudder. A storm without a rudder just destroys itself. Luffy grinned. I like storms. The day of beginning, age 20, 3 years passed. The boys became men. Luffy was 17 now. He was strong, confident, and vibrating with energy. He wore his red vest, his blue shorts, and the straw hat Shanks had given him. Izuku was 20. He looked dangerous. He wore a dark green sleeveless coat with a high collar, open at the chest to reveal a scar over his heart, a remnant of his death in the previous life, or perhaps a training accident. He wore black cargo pants tucked into heavy, custom-made iron combat boots that clanked softly when he walked. Around his waist was a yellow utility belt filled with pouches, flash bombs, smoke pellets, medicinal herbs, and his notebooks. He wore dark green gloves with metal plating on the knuckles. And his hair, once a messy afro, was now an undercut, the top tied back in a short, warrior's ponytail. His eyes were sharp, analytical, and burned with a quiet green fire. The village of Windmill Village gathered at the harbor. You're really leaving, Mayor Whoop Slap sighed. First Ace, now you too. The mountain will be quiet. Don't worry, Mayor. Luffy laughed. I'll be back when I'm king. I'll make sure he doesn't destroy too many islands, Mayor. Izuku bowed respectfully. Makino smiled, handing them a pack of food. Take care of him, Izuku. I will. They boarded their vessel. It wasn't a ship. It was a glorified dinghy with a single sail. It looked pathetic for a future king. This is small, Luffy noted. It's temporary, Izuku said, untying the rope. We'll upgrade. First, we need a crew. They pushed off. The villagers waved. The wind filled the small sail. Finally! Luffy shouted at the ocean. I'm setting sail, but the ocean had a gatekeeper. The water erupted. A massive roar shook the boat. The Lord of the Coast. The giant sea king that had terrorized the bay for a decade. It loomed over them, its jaws dripping, its eyes fixed on the small boat as a snack. Luffy didn't flinch. He just smiled. He's big, Luffy said. He's in the way, Izuku said, standing beside Luffy. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't raise his fists. He just stood there, hands in his pockets. The Sea King lunged. Goma Goma no. Luffy cocked his arm back. Wait, Izuku said softly. Luffy paused. Izuku looked up at the monster. In that moment, Izuku Midoriya channeled everything. The memory of All Might. The memory of the war. The memory of Ace's departure. The memory of Sabo's death. He didn't use armament. He didn't use observation. He pulled from the deep well of his soul, the quality that Garp had sensed years ago. The quality of a king, conqueror's haki. His eyes glowed with a terrifying red-green luminescence. A wave of invisible pressure exploded from him, flattening the waves, cracking the wood of the boat's railing. The air turned heavy and cold. Leave. The single word wasn't shouted. It was projected directly into the beast's primal brain. The Lord of the Coast froze mid-lunge. Its eyes rolled back. It foamed at the mouth. The massive creature trembled, overcome by a fear so absolute it paralyzed its nervous system. It whimpered. Then, it turned and fled, diving deep into the ocean to escape the predator on the boat. Luffy laughed, clapping his hands. Shishishi. Nice one, Izuku. You scared him. Izuku exhaled, the pressure lifting. He rubbed the back of his neck, the menacing aura vanishing instantly, replaced by his usual nervous smile. I didn't want us to smell like fish guts on day one, Izuku muttered. Plus, punching it would have capsized the boat. Luffy hopped onto the prow of the boat. He looked out at the infinite horizon. Hey Izuku. Yeah, Captain? I'm gonna gather a crew. About 10 people. 10 is a good number, Izuku nodded, pulling out a map. Statistically, a compact elite unit functions better than a large armada for infiltration and rapid strikes. And then we're going to the Grand Line. We need a bigger boat first. And supplies. And a navigator, because you have zero sense of direction. Luffy looked back at Izuku. I'm glad you're here, Izuku. Izuku looked at the boy. No, the man, who shone as bright as the sun. He adjusted his gloves. I'm with you until the end, Luffy, Izuku vowed. You handle the dreams. I'll handle the nightmares. Luffy threw his arms up. Let's go. The wind picked up. The small boat cut through the waves, leaving the east blue behind, heading toward destiny. In the distance, a bird squawked. A storm was brewing, and beneath the deck, in Izuku's bag, a bounty poster of Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter, lay waiting. Target number 1, Izuku whispered to himself, his mind already formulating a recruitment strategy. The demon of the East Blue. He smiled. This is going to be fun.